Someone going to... Please, Vivian. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. I'm getting a good workout. For those online, I live in the attic with the bats. One year we found a bat up there. What? On the staircase. Anyway, it's a good workout. Where should we go? Difficulty is I say the same things again and again. But the holy life is not about novelty. I think it's more about reminding and remembering. And most of you have heard all my jokes, and I'm not going to look up joke books. I'm not going to do that. So maybe I'll just go back. What's your sense of the project? Okay? Do you have an overall sense of why we torture ourselves in this hot room all day? What's this all about? No, we're not torturing ourselves. Because if you don't have an overview of a sense of the map, and you can't really get Google Drive to do it for you, how can you really know how to apply effort? But if you have an overview which makes sense to you, then you have understanding. Maybe it's not right understanding, but it is some understanding that you are working from. And if there's some wrong assumptions, you'll hit a brick wall and you say, okay, that's not the way to go. And if, like some people have said to me, well, I'm not really interested in enlightenment, I just want to be a good person. That's sweet, but it's not Buddhism. And how can you understand anicca dukkha anatta if you're just trying to be a good person? So somehow one would have to dismiss part of the teaching and so on and so forth. So certainly if you do the work of Buddhist practice, you will be a better person, undoubtedly. But the exercise is not to become a better person. The exercise is not to become anything, really. So my own, and sorry, I've only got one life story, but my own life story is that the language of Buddhism that has most inspired me as a kind of a goal or a vision is the language that comes from the story of the Buddha's renunciation. And that's a narrative which I don't know if it's true. It's a kind of cultural hagiography. But fiction can point to truth, right? As Margaret Atwood tells us and others like that tell us, and it's true. You can have a fictional story which points to truth. So whether the story of the Buddha's renunciation is true or not, there's a kind of paradigm, is that a kind of model of life that appeals to me. So first of all, you have the young man who is successful, and that's not sufficient. He then renounces family life. Some people say, "Oh, he deserted his wife." That's a kind of modern feminist critique of the Buddha's life. It's a narrative, right? It's a fable to try to point to something. So I see it as actually, he's a very compassionate person, because his life was such a compassionate activity for 45 years of teaching. He'd walk up and down India, and he went back to teach his family and so on. So from his life, I always envisioned someone who was deeply concerned about the meaning of existence, and somehow had to just strike out on his own and figure it all out. And this was painful for his family, but then he returned, and the results were very, very good. So what strikes me about the renunciation story is the fourth part, where Siddhartha sees a sadhu and says to Channa, "Well, who's that guy?" Probably didn't say it quite like that, but and Channa says, "Oh, that's a sadhu. He's seeking moksha. He's seeking the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, the unborn, nibbana, peace, the deathless." And this is exactly what Siddhartha has been questioning. Well, what's the meaning of existence? Like he wasn't interested in zoology. He just thought beings are born and they die. Is that all there's about it? He wasn't interested in botany. See, plants. What is there a deeper meaning to all this? So he wasn't absorbed in science in that way. He was absorbed in a deeper existential question, which I think we all are in some way. And then that's the question that drove from the fable part, for me, that his curiosity and his inquiry were driven by that. He made a few mistakes on the way, called 6 years of ascetic practice, where he tortured himself. Right? What's that about? Wrong understanding. That's what it's about, basically. And then he seems to have met up with some teachers and got some high attainments, but that wasn't sufficient. Why is that? Because the way I reckon, because it was created. It was not uncreated. It was something structured and built upon, and then it fell apart. And we've all had that. All of us have tried doing very kind of structured meditations, and I've built up stuff which is really lovely, and then it crumbled. I think we all have done that. So whatever way the Gautama, the Buddha, did that, much more profound than I've ever done, obviously, but that wasn't sufficient either. That wasn't sufficient. And then he contemplated deeply, and there's the enlightenment. And then the first person he met asked him, and he saw how radiant the Buddha was, and said, and who are you, sir? He says, I am the all-enlightened one. This guy says, oh, that's nice. Walks away. Good for you, yeah. And then he taught the Four Noble Truths. So for me, that statement, there is the uncreated, the unconditioned, the deathless, Amaravati. That is so profoundly important because that sets up my vision. And that matches my own intuitions from childhood and early adulthood. I had some experiences which were profoundly different. They weren't long, but they were life-changing, life-altering. And so that is the way I entered monasticism, really, from that feeling there is otherness, there is transcendence, there is something deeply profound about our possibility, which the Abrahamic religions weren't really answering, and I wasn't. Like I joke, our family went to church every other year, so it was, it wasn't a big thing at all. But when I read Karen Armstrong's book on the history of God, gosh, that was interesting, because there she went through various kinds of texts in the Judaic, the Islamic, and the Christian tradition, all the Abrahamic traditions, and you could see there were touches of the same language, always on the edges of orthodoxy, but the same kind of language of transcendence. Of course, my Christian friend would say, well, you're just reading that in a Buddhist way, which is also true. But anyway, so that, for me, that and the language of like unconditioned, uncreated, how do you talk at dinner about that? You're talking more about your anger, or fear, or happiness, or whatever. But the language of transcendence in Christianity never clicked with me. The word God never clicked with me. But when I read Karen Armstrong's book, I could see, oh, okay, there's a whole range of possibilities in this word. So that language then I combine that with the Four Noble Truths. There is suffering, there's a cause, which is attachment to desire. There's the end of suffering, and that end is the letting go of desire. And there's the path which leads to the end of suffering. So when I started to combine those two, and I started to think about wanting, I could see with the wanting that the Buddha was pointing to was always something about the objective experience. And the objective experience of emotions or memories or physical feelings or pleasure or pain or mood, all of that, I kept contemplating, well, that's the conditioned. That's the conditioned. So if I'm always going to the conditioned, that can't be the unconditioned. So then I saw the logic, I have to let go of wanting, of the attachment to wanting. That made a lot of sense to me. So when in my early years as a monk, there was a lot of gross wanting, a lot of coarse wanting basically to jump the wall and get out of here, whatever. And I kept thinking, but wherever you go, you're still going to the conditioned. You're still going to some experience in time. So I was talking with Tariq. We're not supposed to talk, but he brings me my cheese, so we had a small discussion about time. So when you contemplate anicca, why do we point to anicca? Because that's about time. So don't look for the timeless in the time-bound. Doesn't mean that things that are bound by time, good weather and bad weather, they're just the way they are. So then the conclusion, and this is for me all about right understanding. It's not, it's not like I'm just trying to take on Buddhist orthodoxy and then feel comfortable with some kind of Buddhist opinion as opposed to a Christian opinion. That won't liberate me. But I am trying to use Buddhist concepts because I find the teaching so helpful and interesting to see, well, why are we using that language? So then it becomes obvious that the unconditioned has to be here now. It can't be tomorrow. It can't be like in the next meditation. It can't be something that I achieve by making a lot of effort to get something other than what is. So all that kind of inner mumbling, inner contemplation gets me to understanding the project. And what's the project is to question the very sense of presence, because that's the only thing that I could notice which is not bound by time. So, the presence that is here now, is that different than the presence that was yesterday? Because it has no quality. Presence is presence. Awareness, knowing. So then there's a kind of, from the craving mind going out into sense experience, there's a sense of what renunciation is about. Renunciation isn't about eating less sugar. That's about diet and diabetes. Renunciation is an involution. It's a going inwards to the very sense of presence, as opposed to a going outwards to the quality of experience. Now, I go outwards to the quality of experience, certainly. We all do. I enjoy comfort. I even have a frappuccino every now and then. So it's not like from some kind of moralistic point that you should renounce and you should behave yourself and all of that. No. It's more from right understanding. It's from right understanding. And so the mind, so that takes me to the beautiful teachings of Luang Pu Dun, which I think combine those two very well. So as most of you know, he rephrases the Four Noble Truths. He says, the mind going outside is the cause. The result of the mind going outside is suffering. The mind knowing the mind is the path. The result of the mind knowing the mind is the end of suffering. And that teaching, I've used it a lot, haven't I, for many, many years. That kind of combines the two. So the mind going out is the cause, because attention is now not available to presence, because it's taken up with happiness, unhappiness, emotion, memory, a lot of memory, thinking, ego thinking, resentment, fascination, disgust. All of those are objects. So the mind going out, that's the cause. It's not the quality of those things, not really. It's just the mind's always going out there. And the result is suffering. And it's not just the suffering of having a bad day. It's the suffering of not having realized the unconditioned. So the import of the word dukkha for me isn't just like, oh, he's got life is suffering because you've got a toothache. It's much more profound than that, because for me it's coming from the Buddha's aspiration and realization that there is this possibility of deep peace. So by the mind going out, the mind's not available. But when the mind knows the mind, then availability is vision, is seeing. There's the silence of the mind. And that involution then confirms, that works. That does work. And that's what I think insight is about. The word vipassana is, I think, much misused. It's a kind of technique-y kind of brand name now for meditation. But what it really means, I think, is that those kinds of things where you sense, that's the direction. If there's any direction about the unconditioned, the uncreated, the unoriginated, and where can that direction be? It has to be here and now and inwards rather than outwards. So that's what I've been. So that's my sense of the project, and it matches what I was searching for, and it matches my own intuitions. Maybe it doesn't match yours. So you've got to see. Just come and see for yourself. So that's and that understanding for me is very, very helpful, because when my mind is not resisting some negative emotion or whatever, well, no. It can't be. The negative emotion isn't the problem. It's the resistance, attachment to craving. Fear's not the problem. It's the resistance to fear, attachment to craving. Wanting people to like me is not the problem. It's attaching to that wanting, etc., etc. So attachment to wanting as opposed to wanting is different. We hear the lawnmower, loud, soft, loud, soft. You want soft? Fine. Who doesn't want soft? But that's not the problem. It's like not being able to bear the loud, resenting the loud, attaching to the soft and resenting the loud. It's the attachment that's the problem. Some people mistake Buddhism and think, well, you shouldn't have any wanting. Whatever, Bhante, I'll take anything. Well, no, I'll have some milk in my coffee, thanks. And that's just normal. So what is attachment to wanting? And that is again, that's a deeper question, because let's say feeling hurt by someone is very hurtful. It really hurts when someone hurts you. And you can say, oh, I should just have upekkha, right? I should just be cool. I'm the Buddha. But no one's like that. When you get hurt, you get hurt. And that arises in consciousness, and that's an object. And so the capacity to be hurt, and yet say your piece, and say, oh, that feels really painful. And witnessing that and allowing that to be as it is a hard practice. And yet, what other way could you do? Well, you could distract. You could go to the fridge and then watch cat videos. That would appease the pain. Not for long, of course. But if one were to just witness it and say, yeah, it feels like this, it feels like this. And then the question I often ask myself in those more complex and powerful experiences of life, I ask myself, what is unchanging? In this experience, what is unchanging? And that gets me away from think I have to fix it. I have to kind of make it right, or I have to figure it out, or I have to blame someone, or I have to do something. No, it has arisen. This is vipaka kamma for some reason. Hit up one of my buttons, and then, okay, what is it that's unchanging? Now what that does, like the language of personality can be very loud, can't it? And sometimes I think it's like a puppet. One of those ventriloquists have that keeps blabbing in the head, blah, 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 blah. Especially when you get really injured by something, when you get cheated or something like that, and that just explodes into ego thoughts. That's natural. It's not pleasant, but it is natural. So what to do? Well, the thing we go out into the object and then try to sort it out. Or we distract to another object, which is okay too. But the kind of way of involution or inversion, or I don't know the language for this, but kind of like the questioning, well, what is it that is unchanging? What is it that's unconditioned? And that is not a philosophical question. It's a question that brings you to silent attention. And in that silent attention, you've reached the end, because there's nowhere else to go. You can't go further than that. You can't go beyond that, because you've hit the mind, the knowing. Now that you trust that, can you wait with that? Well, what'll happen, of course, 3 seconds later, bang, the emotion comes up. There's the memory. I'm going to kill that guy. What is it that's unchanging? Now, this might go on for 4 days. It might go on for a week. If you got jilted by someone, it might go on for 6 months. Who knows? It might go on for an hour. It might end in 5 minutes. But the practice is the same. So you might think, I need therapy. Well, maybe. But maybe you don't. Maybe you just have to bear witness to something very, very difficult. And so that's why we talk about things like patience. But sometimes even that language is like, I'm going to grin and bear it. But I think there's a more powerful language of this sense of coming back. What is it that's unchanging? So my own investigation of that is, even though the upwelling of memory and hurt and thought is very powerful, if I have enough faith in that mind knowing the mind part of Luang Pu Dun's teaching, if I stay with that, then even though the intensity seems hopeless, it does fade. And then what's interesting is all of a sudden the heart lights up. Now, I don't know why. I can't figure that one out at all. But my speculation is it kind of comes from when we did this body meditation. And I suggest feel your ear. Well, how often do you feel your ear? Well, when it gets bit by a mosquito or when you've got earphones on, right? But usually your ear's not the kind of dominant sense experience. But as soon as you say, and you kind of localize your attention, feelings in the ear come into consciousness. It's really magic, isn't it? I mean, why should it be that way? Anyway, I find it going, wow, look at that. There's an ear there. There's two ears. Now, I think once you start to stop going out and you come into sort of kind of receptive awareness, then the heart becomes more conscious, the body becomes more conscious, and fear becomes more known as a embodied thing. Love becomes more conscious because it's now possible to come forward, because attention is no longer in the place of self-narrative, of ego out there. And that to me is very magical. When we read the literature of transcendence, or we meet beings who we think have attained to transcendence, I think of especially Luang Por Chah and Luang Por Sumedho and Luang Por Liam, fabulous people, and you're just in their presence and you know this is love. This isn't some kind of frigid monk who is living in the opaque realms of a freezer. Its warmth and its vitality and all of that is there. And where does it come from? It comes from nature. It's natural. Enlightenment is natural. These things are natural. And what's the problem? The mind going outside is the problem. That's the cause. The mind knowing the mind is the path. Then it doesn't really matter what the object that you're attracted to. Then it's no longer an analysis of that. It's a more simple returning to home, knowing the home ground. And so, what I suggested today was, you know that you know. That's the mind knowing the mind. And then wait. And if you just start to do that, you'll see that within 10 seconds you're anticipating, looking for something. That's the vipaka kamma of the searching mind, of the greed mind, of the resistance mind. It's powerful. It's not like you kind of just ignore it because we're born with it. There's nothing wrong with it. So as that searching mind starts to come up, it's unfulfilled desire. That's what it is. And it seeks an object. So memory triggers it off. Things like habit triggers it off. And all the time, there's a kind of, because Tariq asked me, he was talking again, that Tariq. Tariq's just come from Jordan, so. What about effort? Don't we have to make effort? Well, it's quite rigorous effort to just notice the awakened mind and to sustain that. But it's very subtle. It is rigorous, but it's subtle. And I don't think we trust it. We trust more in the becoming mind. So if you put all that together in as right understanding, then intuitively you won't be you won't be thinking in terms of time. You'll be thinking in terms of presence, because that's the only thing that makes sense in that way. You will be thinking in terms of time when you You plant your carrots next spring. Sure, that's allowed. But this is different. This is transcendence. When you have an experience which seems transcendent, and then of course you lose it, then that is one of the strongest desires we have in the spiritual life, isn't it? Finally, wow. 15 years I've been enduring these retreats. And finally, and the next day, you're just a basket case, aren't you? You just, where is it? And then you just feel, I want something. Wanting feels like this. You come back to the same run. I can't be trying to get something. I have to trust in presence, trust in awareness. Okay, I feel like I've lost it. Feeling like I've lost it feels like this. And if you do that, these things become more and more, they're soap bubbles. They're the hugeness of them, all of a sudden they just don't hold the mind's attention because you don't believe in them. The mind's attention is held, certainly if there's been like real pain inflicted on one, sure, then one has to bear with that. But a lot of it is just thought, just the soap bubbles of ego making realities which are not true. So to see the end of thought and the end of self, not the end of consciousness, no, the end of self in the kind of ego sense is to see the end of thought. What am I going to do tomorrow? When there's silence. And why did I do that yesterday? When there's silence. Viradhammo is great. Viradhammo's a twit. Well, there's nothing there. It's the soap bubbles, and yet we can pick up the soap bubbles and we can make a meal out of it, and it's just thought. It's just self-thought created and habitual. But so we start to penetrate those things when there's the end of thought. Now, in the end of thought, is there a personality? Like right now, if you just listen, is there a personality called Viradhammo or Jane or Tariq? I can't find anything. If I start to worry about the monastery, sure, there's Viradhammo worrying about the monastery. That's an object. So you start to get a sense that personality is an object coming and going through thought, but consciousness is not a personality. Awareness knows personality. So the kind of belief in the personality, or the language of personality that can so confuse us, I don't believe you, Mara. No, I'm not falling for that. It's like this. And then the trusting, just keep doing that, and the radiance of the heart and the mind just become more and more apparent, because they're natural. They're not constructed, they're natural. Okay, I'll leave that for your reflection.